What has this offseason taught us about the direction of the defensive line market? What should we be paying attention to over the next 12 months? We're breaking that down today on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. We're the Draft Dudes. I'm Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. He's Kyle Crabbs from Locked On Dolphins. And we are your NFL experts here with you daily to talk team building across the league. The Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast with the Draft Dudes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On NFL Scouting your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, we appreciate y'all being here very, very much.
Joe, happy National Joe and Kyle Go to Training Camp Week.
Yes.
To you here on Locked On NFL Scouting.
It looks like you're already there.
I'm not at home. I'm in Miami Lakes right now. And had practice yesterday, have practice the next 2 days, and then I come home on Tuesday night.
So Miami Lakes, Miami Gardens, Miami,
downtown Miami, Miami Beach.
Oh, it's very confusing.
But I fly out of Fort Lauderdale.
You look very Miami'd up right now with you got a little tan going, sunglasses on, and despite being indoors, some kind of new haircut going. I mean, you're ready for the moment. You do. I'm complimenting that. I would say that you very much look like you're in South Florida.
All right, so let's let the cat out of the bag, right? We are recording on Saturday, and we're talking about defensive line market today. And the reason why we're disclosing that we're recording on Saturday is because I have training camp. Joe, you are going to Buffalo.
Yeah.
Midweek. So
to be the opposite look of what you have going on. Probably have like a big fur coat on and a scarf, you know?
Look forward to the selfie when that happens. Grow the beard out. But if Nick Bosa or Christian Wilkins or Chris Jones get contract extensions between lunchtime on Saturday and when we run the show, we don't know about it. Okay. but we assume to make sure that your content delivery schedule is not interrupted with our travel plans. So we're getting it in a little bit ahead of time, and we're going to talk about those players and those situations and the contract market itself for the positions. But cat's out of the bag. So if we don't get to, say, Bosa signs for $31 million per season, he's going to get a lot of money. And then you get the phone calls that come through as you're trying to record. So,
well, listen, if those guys get contracts, they're going to get a lot of money, and we'll probably say something along the lines of they really deserved it. You know what I mean? So, but we will obviously talk about them here today as we get started by kind of reflecting on what's been happening here with the defensive line market. And Kyle, it has been a busy stretch. We knew this was going to happen, right? We had a podcast. Yeah. One of our first episodes of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast was looking at this defensive tackle market and saying, wow, you had this draft class of Quinnen Williams and Jeffrey Simmons and Dexter Lawrence and Christian Wilkins and Ed Oliver. These guys are going to make a bunch of money. Not to mention, we knew Chris Jones needed a new contract. We saw the movement within the offseason with Daron Payne and Dalvin Tomlinson and Javon Hargrave got the bag. Like, these dudes are getting paid. Defensive line is a good place to be because you have a wide spectrum here. I mean, you're seeing young stars getting a lot of money, but then there's even some guys that, like, I'm a little surprised with how much they got, like a Draymond Jones, even Zach Allen. You know, these guys got the bag, man. There's some money out there for these defensive linemen.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the players that got double-digit millions of dollars per season on average across their new contracts, and it's Fletch, Malik Collins, Devon Hamilton. These guys getting contract extensions, $10 million per season or more. Anya Meta, Zadarius Smith signing a new deal. Marcus Davenport, and then Dalvin Tomlinson and Wosu, Zach Allen, Ed Oliver, Alex Highsmith with a contract extension, Draymond Jones, Trey Hendrickson just got a contract extension, Hargrave, Payne, Lawrence, Simmons, William, like, there's loads and loads and loads and loads of players when you compare it to some of the other positions that we've talked about and the hardship of those players like safety and linebacker and running back and even to some degree tight end. I know Cole Kmet put a little egg on our face by getting about $12.5 million per season on a 4-year extension. But there is no such thing as a non-premium position on the defensive line unless you are a true early down and short yardage nose tackle. And I think that as you reflect on the guys that got paid, even guys like Dexter Lawrence and Javon Hargrave, guys that are stout enough to play in the A-gap, but athletic and powerful enough to collapse the pocket, that is a new premium position. And those guys got paid like it, and they deserve it. It's not just the stereotypical 3-techs anymore.
Yeah, dude, if you're an A-gap defender that can rush like a Hargrave or a Lawrence or Wilkins, money is coming. And I think part of what's contributed to this, and obviously we just celebrated that 2019 interior defensive line class. The last few draft classes haven't been really brimming with talent on the interior defensive line. Yeah. And I know you're a little ahead of me right now when it comes to the 2024 prospects, but I mean, are we going to get a big influx? Are there multiple Jalen Carters coming? Because if that continues to be the case, these vets are going to keep getting the bag. I mean, even Colin Saunders and some of these Malik Collins guys, Nathan Shepard, these guys are getting some money out there, man.
Now, I don't know that you're going to have multiple Jalen Carters.
Well, he's a pretty rare guy, so that was
what I do know is that there is a guy athletically who's actually down here in South Florida who plays to that same athletic potential in Leonard Taylor III. Just like his predicted 40 time is about a 4.8 flat, and he's like 305 pounds.
Yeah, that's going to be helpful.
He's tied the team lead the last 2 years as a true freshman and a true sophomore in tackles for loss. He's got 18 over the last 2 seasons, I believe, 7.5 and then 10.5, and he's only started 9 games. He's like profiles very similarly to Jalen Carter. All the gifts you could possibly ask for. Freakish athleticism. I think he bends better than Jalen Carter does, but he's got to put it all together. Mm-hmm. So that's one player. And then there's Newton from Illinois, a player who you really like. He's somebody who I don't think is super scheme transcendent, but these Draymond Jones type players, I think he profiles in that same kind of light. So you have a couple gifted penetration pass rush style players at the very least that I've got eyes on, and I'm still working my way through those interior guys in this class too.
All right. Well, obviously we'll talk more about those in the coming months, but coming up here after a quick break, we're going to talk about some of the upcoming expiring contracts to pay attention to. But first, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. And it's all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. So whether or not you want to bet on the over-under, you can bet on the money line, you can bet on who's going to hit the first home run. It's a lot of fun over there at MLB. There's simply no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Love a good take a swing.
Take a swing, baby.
Baseball.
Florida Marlins, right?
Yeah, not so hot after the All-Star break, from what I understand. Imagine having bandwidth to watch baseball, though.
Long season, man. Ebbs and flows.
162 is a lot of games.
And if you want to bet on them, go to FanDuel.
All right, so we're talking 2024 upcoming expiring contracts.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of next on our list. And Joe, there are some names here. Names that pop to me. Obviously, you have Chris Jones, they're working on the contract extension.
He wants 31?
He wants 31. It's my understanding. Joe, branded player of this podcast, DJ Reader, is an expiring contract. And you talk about A-gap players who have a dominant presence.
a little tricky. He's going to be 30 here, right? Like that's what's
Right.
different between him and like Dexter Lawrence. So
I don't know. You're seeing some of these guys that are still into their early 30s, still getting.
You're going to bring up Hargrave, right? Hargrave got the bag, 20 mil per, right?
Yeah, 21 per. And then you have Leonard Williams, who's 30s and got void year. Daniil Hunter on the edge, Marcus Davenport on the edge, a couple Vikings players, Darius Smith signed a 1-year deal with Cleveland.
Our guy Grover Stewart.
We're assuming Nick Bosa gets done before that.
Yeah.
Josh Allen with the Jaguars. It's another meaningful player. Rashawn Gary.
Yeah, Rashawn Gary. Wilkins. That's another one that could happen soon as well. A lot of belief out there.
I would if I were them personally. Yeah. So a fun angle to look at this through, Joe, is players who last season played like high volume of snaps, right? Because that's
Christian Wilkins.
That's the cherry on top, is the players who
he played 9,000 snaps last year. I'm pretty sure,
and each and every one of them was like 10,000 miles an hour. It's just the motor. He looks great too. I think he lost a little weight. I think he's going to play a little lighter this year. We have not mentioned Brian Burns, Joe.
Big bucks. Brian Burns.
Let's not do the thing. I was going to drop a number in here, but we'll save it for predictions. Okay. So Zach Sealer, another Miami Dolphins player, he played 76% of the defensive snaps last season for the Dolphins. It was like 900 snaps that he played. Montez Sweat. There's a lot of talent scheduled. Grover Stewart, we didn't acknowledge yet either, as a really, really solid, maybe not the same pass rush ceiling as some of these guys that are getting 18, 19, 20, 21, $22 million. But if you told me Grover Stewart commanded $12, $13 million as an interior defender, would you bat an eye at it?
No, I think that's what he should get.
Yeah. So maybe that's a hot take for us. There's a lot of available talent, and not all of it, based on the expansion that we've seen, is probably going to come back to the teams that they're on. So that's the good news. I think you have a chance for some teams to really, Chicago Bears, improve their defensive line units next offseason between what we perceive as draft-eligible prospects and players that are probably going to be available in free agency, just because the volume here, a bunch of these guys are going to get re-signed. Not everybody's going to get re-signed.
Right. Regardless, there's just going to be a huge amount of money going to these players. I mean, Rashawn Gary is such an interesting player. Blew up in his second season. Had the ACL tear last year. Spot Rack projects him at $26 million per season.
So 26?
26.
I might take the under on that, but I think that's a hard pass.
That seems like a lot, yeah. Especially when I pull up Brian Burns and they're projecting him at 18.3.
Yeah.
There's not a $8 million gap.
You could switch him.
Yeah, I think switching them would probably be a little bit closer to where I think they ultimately land. See where they have Josh Allen, edge rusher, 22.
The defensive Josh Allen.
Yeah, not to be confused.
So 26 would be, as of the contracts that we have established as of the time of this recording, 26 as a projection for APY would be the fourth highest paid defensive line contract in the NFL, behind Aaron Donald, TJ Watt, and Joey Bosa. That's it. So, I mean, that's a stratosphere. I think you're going to see a number of guys crack, but I'd be surprised if Rashawn Gary's among them.
If he goes out and has a crazy year like he did 2 years ago,
I don't even think that crazy gets you in that stratosphere, does it?
I thought Rashawn Gary was really good. We did our defensive player of the year ballots, and we had to stack 5 guys. He was on mine.
I think he was honorable mention for me that year.
Yeah,
he was great, but I mean that's a stratosphere of players that the north of $25 million club right now is very, very lean. I think you'll see some edge rushers that get that, but Gary wouldn't be on my short list.
I always like to take a little peek towards the 5th year options. We got some names. We got some names here. And I don't mean in a good way. We got Jalen Phillips, Miami Dolphins. That's feeling pretty good.
Micah Parsons.
Oh, Micah Parsons is going to be a big one. You got Kwity Paye with the Colts. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka with the Bucks. Jason Odafe Owe with the Ravens. Greg Rousseau with the Bills. That should be an easy yes.
We're batting like 50% right now. We're batting 500.
It's probably just Parsons, Phillips, and Rousseau right now. Tryon, Owe, Paye don't feel like slam dunks to me, Kyle.
No.
And if you want to consider Zaven Collins in this world, that's not tracking well either. Peyton Turner? No.
Get him early, right?
Right.
Rousseau's the diamond in the rough here, is the rare physical talent who was just underdeveloped and went into a good situation to pull out the best of his traits.
Well, I mean, he didn't even play in 2020. He took the year off with COVID. Had 1 year of tape. I mean, he was like he was a receiver and safety in high school. Switches to like D-line for Miami, blows does not look good at his pro day, right? Like, remember his 3-cone? He just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Bill rolled the dice, and looks like he's going to be a player for him.
I mean, that's the thing that impresses me about what Buffalo has done is between the Josh Allen player development and the Gregory Rousseau player development. I know they have their fair share of swings and misses, just like every other team in the league, but guys like that with those kinds of tools to develop into being the caliber of players that they are, I think is a huge feather in the cap of everything that they're doing in Buffalo.
It's helpful. Need some more of that.
No, I don't know about more of it, but
Kwity Paye's such a fascinating one. Like, I think when I look at all these guys, that's the guy that I look at and say maybe, but if he has a good year this year, you could see that being a big yes. Whereas like Peyton Turner, what does Peyton Turner have to do this year to pick up that option?
Break the sack record.
He's been doing next to nothing to start his career.
Which is the other side of the Gregory Rousseau coin, right? Because Peyton Turner was another toolsy but underdeveloped player who played more than Gregory Rousseau, but played at a smaller school and lower level of competition that you say, oh, he's got the traits, we'll pull it out. Hasn't happened. And New Orleans isn't giving you the warm and fuzzies with all the other edge defenders that they've been drafting.
No. Exactly.
Like, they went out and drafted Foskey this year in the second round.
After Brzee in the first.
And Brzee in the first. Didn't they add another one too? Since
probably
Peyton Turner?
I mean, Granderson's really emerged for them since that.
Right. But not
it's like they drafted Marcus Davenport and then they had Trey Hendrickson, right? Like,
yes. The early ones haven't gone their way, but the later round ones have.
Yeah.
Speaking of Hendrickson, almost no discussion around that contract extension. Very under the radar because it came in the midst of all the early training camp injuries, I think. So it kind of just was like, oh, by the way, Trey Hendrickson signed a contract extension.
Yeah.
It's a good deal for them.
He's really turned. I mean,
he had as quiet of a season as he's had in the last 3 years.
But
this past year, like, if he's anything close to what he was the previous 2 seasons, like, that's a great steal versus the trends of the market with how rapidly accelerating the spending is going on the D-line.
And they drafted Miles Murphy this year with their first pick. Like, I think we sort of forget that. Like, they took that guy. So Hendrickson, Murphy, and Hubbard, and they still have Cam Sample and Joseph Asai. The cupboard is full in Cincinnati here with these edge rushers. All right, Kyle, in just a moment, you and I are going to be tasked with making a prediction about something regarding the future of the defensive line market in the NFL. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Okay. You want to start with Brian Burns?
We should do something with Brian Burns.
So we'll just do edge.
Okay.
Here are the players scheduled to make on an APY basis in excess of $20 million on their current contracts. TJ Watt, 28. Joey Bosa, 27. Myles Garrett, 25. Khalil Mack, 23.5. Max Crosby, 23.5. Bradley Chubb, 22. Trey Hendrickson, 21. Von Miller, 20. The next highest is 17.5, and it's Harold Landry and Cam Jordan.
We're going to get some 20 million club guys here soon. Well, I mean, Bosa's obviously joining the group.
And Nick's probably going to get 28.5 is probably the floor, right? There's no way he doesn't enter into negotiations and have the leverage to get the highest paid edge guy.
Parsons going to be contract eligible after the year too. So that's going. Well, I mean, Watt's getting 28, so a little more than that is what I would assume.
Right. I think the conversation there is less about
what Bosa gets is where we start that conversation. Then we can get to Parsons. Because Bosa's not playing without a deal. Is Bosa pushed for 30? If Watt's at 28, does he say 30?
Man, I say yes, and it's all because we're still just trying to catch up to how aggressive that Aaron Donald deal was.
Because that's going to have an impact on Parsons.
Everybody can come back and say Aaron Donald money. Top pass rusher. There's that ambiguity that now exists that you can use that contract and really leverage it. Chris Jones gets 30. If Chris Jones gets 31, Nick Bosa going to take less than Chris Jones?
That's what's so fascinating to me about Chris Jones. I think he's awesome. But I thought it would be easier for Kansas City because I figured you took the Quinnen deal, you bump it up a little bit, and that's your deal. He wants into the 30s. I think that gets a little bit more challenging. We have to start asking yourself some questions about value and whether or not you want to be that team that does it.
I mean, it's the hard thing about waiting, right? If you did this back in March or April, would 25 have? Because here's what existed: Aaron Donald, and then deals that have gotten done recently include Quinnen Williams, who's number 2. Jeffrey Simmons got done this offseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's number 3. Daron Payne got done this offseason, right?
Mm-hmm.
22.5. Dexter Lawrence got done this offseason. That's 22.5. Leonard Williams is the next contract at 21 that existed before this offseason. So you said, look, Chris, we know you're at 21 right now, or you're at 20 right now. We're going to give you a 25% raise and put you at 25. You're going to be the second high-paced interior defensive lineman behind Aaron Donald.
That conversation can happen in February. It cannot happen now.
Right. It can't happen now. And all those other contracts have done where now he's got all this extra leverage point to be like, look, I'm a staple in a championship caliber defense, and I'm your best player up front, and it's not close.
Yeah. Do we talk trade here? I mean, because we saw this sort of happen with Tyreek Hill, where they weren't ready to meet his contract demands, and they traded him.
You don't have the Patrick Mahomes player on that side of the ball for Kansas City,
because he is the Patrick Mahomes player on that side of the ball.
On that side of the ball.
Yeah, if they didn't have Chris Jones, I mean, we talked about this when we did our West X Factors. It was like, what does this defensive line outside of Chris Jones, especially on the interior?
Right. Don't love it. So I think they got to come up and get that done. But if I'm Nick Bosa, I'm waiting until Chris Jones gets done. Or I would want to, unless you're going to cave and be like, yes, 30, no questions asked.
Man, you'd like to think 30 gets it done. But did the
like
Chiefs want to do that?
Right.
All right, so we started this by talking about Brian Burns.
Which we have not discussed since.
Okay, so I think Brian Burns comes in at $24 million.
Okay, so that's the same spot that I was kind of eyeing. So that would be 4th. That would put him in front of Crosby, Khalil Mack, and Bradley Chubb. That's kind of the next 3 names now, but behind Myles Garrett.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is he has to be behind Myles Garrett. And then Parsons is going to come and blow the whole thing off the roof here.
Parsons, okay, so if we're going to throw 2 edge predictions out here, Parsons pushes for Aaron Donald money, and Brian Burns checks in 4th place on the APY for edge guys.
I'd meet you there. Can we shift this now to like Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins? Because I think those are the most fascinating interior guys. And you say Aaron Donald money. When you say Aaron Donald money, you mean 31.6 AAV. Yes. And then it's Quinnen at 24.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Jones, it seems like he's going to really try to push for 30 here.
And I think he'll probably get between 29 and 30. I think if you're just going to say, okay, we're going to meet you in the middle. He wants 31. I'm sure Kansas City would like it to be closer to Quinnen's 25. Go 28.5, 29. Let's get it done.
Okay. So he comes in at number 2. I don't think he tops Donald. I still think he's a tick below Donald.
Yeah.
Christian Wilkins is where it gets real interesting for me. And I think for Miami.
That's why it's not done.
Right. For Miami, I want this deal done because I think Christian Wilkins is going to have a big jump in pass rush and sack production this year. And that happens, it's going to get more expensive. And maybe if you're Christian Wilkins, you kind of know that. But also, bird in hand's better than 2 in the bush.
Right.
So if that deal does get done sooner rather than later, it's probably Hargrave got 21. Dexter Lawrence got 21.8.
I don't think there's any realistic situation where he gets into that stratosphere of dollars.
You don't think he gets over 20?
I think that's what Christian and his camp want.
Well, then for them, they might have to just bet on themselves and let the year play out.
Which I think kind of benefits the Dolphins from one angle, too, because they're tight for the cap in 2024. Their long-term flexibility is much more attractive. You get to figure out who you want your next round of big money contracts to be. You can transition out of some older players and pay the young guys that are in the pipeline, and they could and you can replace them. But it's like you got to figure out whatever your quarterback situation is beyond the Tua Tagovailoa 5th-year option that he's scheduled to play on next year, the Christian Wilkins contract, the Zach Sealer contract. He's currently getting paid like $3.2 million. He's probably going to get $10 million. He's going to get $10 million more per season than that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you got Robert Hunt and Connor Williams as like all very prominent players that are expiring contracts. Like you're not going to keep all of them. You're just not.
The benefit to this for Miami is Wilkins is playing on the hard 5th-year option this year. Is it 10.7 or something like that?
Yes.
Can you do an extension that reduces that cap hit this year, which then turns into rollover cap space to help you with 2024?
So there's 2 different schools of thought that you can do this with. You can give him a roster bonus up front. You've got $13 million in cap space. If Dalvin Cook doesn't happen, you could take the $13 million and you could take a lump of that into a player contract extension and just say, look, we're going to increase your cap space in year 1, and then you're going to have the reduced cap space in year 2. Or we can do the big signing bonus, prorate it out, put a void year on the back end of it, and use the rollover cap to help buy us more cap space too. So it's like, do you want to take the cap space that you have now and push more money on a new contract into now? Or would you rather defer it out and then take more rollover cap? So I don't have the answer, but like you can take it both ways.
If I'm Miami, I'm getting this done. I mean, like I know that we want to talk timetable, and that's interesting. It's a player you drafted that's like a foundational piece of what you're doing, like a big identity player that brings like all the energy, like whatever you would want in a football player, you get it.
He's it. Yeah. He was the first commitment that this regime made to rebuilding the roster.
Right.
And he's become everything you hoped he would be. He's one of the best run defenders in the entire NFL. We think the pass rush growth is going to come. He had 3 sacks yesterday in practice, going against Connor Williams and Robert Hunt, like not going against whoever was playing the left guard spot. So he was going good on good and was phenomenal. He looks phenomenal. We know this scheme has had players like Akeem Hicks that have been dominant players. Like I wouldn't put it past him to have that level of performance and production. What Akeem Hicks was capable of at with his peak in Chicago, like I think Christian Wilkins can do that. So
I think he gets over 20.
I don't think it gets done. I think with their current roster situation, I think they played out to have more information. You can always franchise tag him next year. That's not an ideal situation. But then you'll have more clarity on the entire picture of the roster. If you looked at Wilkins in a vacuum, yes, you'd want it done today because you know it's probably going to cost you $3-4 million per season if you wait until after the year.
Call him up, say, hey, we'll give you the Hargrave deal. 4 years, 84.
I agree with you. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's one of the
problem
best.
is he's going to go and have like 8 sacks this year. And
Isn't
he's going to be like
4.5 plays.
25. Bring it on down.
4.5 plays is the difference for your entire perception as an interior defensive lineman.
Right.
And he played in a scheme that specifically was like, you're going to set picks and posts, and we're not going to ask you to be the primary pass rusher. But people just look at the sack number and say, oh, we can't rush the passer.
It's a hard foil with Wilkins because like they're none of even the ancillary pass rush metrics are not good for him.
Right.
Let him rush, and I feel like that's going to happen this year.
Yes, it is.
But if he goes out and has 10 sacks, 11, 12, which is not crazy to me to think.
No.
This becomes a mid-20s conversation as opposed to maybe 20. That's why I'm like, hey, you want the Hargrave deal? Here it is.
If he gets anywhere near double digits, I mean, you're going to put him – he's a better run defender than Quinnen Williams. He's not a better pass rush than Quinnen Williams. But if he has comparable pass rush production and is an elite run defender and you wait a year, Christian's going to say, hey, that Quinnen Williams contract looks pretty darn good. Let's talk about it.
I love the tension here because who's going to cave?
I think they will let it pass through the season. It's my expectation right now.
And if you're Miami.
But if I was Miami, I would want it done yesterday.
Wilkins knows.
So there you go. And if it happens, then I'll happily take the L and say, oh, well, Christian Wilkins is now on a contract. And it's probably cheaper than what it would have been.
He'd be the one guy from that group that doesn't get the deal now.
Yes, he's the only member of the 19 class of guys that didn't get an extension right now.
Yet. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just.
Yeah. We'll see. And we will see all of you next time here on Locked On NFL Scouting. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He is Joe Marino. Yeah, I'm not my regular setup, so I don't know what's over my shoulder to point on YouTube.
Look, we can touch fingers. Like, do it.
Because we are on YouTube and wherever you find your favorite podcast. So come on by and see us touch fingers here on the screen and hit subscribe. Come on back. Shout out to our everydayers who are locked in with us on a daily basis. We will talk to you all again tomorrow.